The topic of this chapter is factoring. What is factoring? Factoring is writing a polynomial as a product of polynomials. Well, in order to do that, there is an important thing to know, which is the greatest common factor. That is, the greatest common factor, abbreviated as GCF. The greatest common factor. Well, when a question comes to you, how to get the greatest common factor, or factors, how to get them? Well, the easiest answer to this question is that by factoring the coefficients into prime factors and then write each common base with its smallest exponent. That is, factor the coefficients into prime factors and then write each common base with its smallest exponent. Okay? What do we mean by prime factors? Well, prime factors, it can be a prime number base. This is the first one, or it can be just a variable. We will see together, okay, in the following examples. If a question comes to you, find the greatest common factor of 2 to the power 3 and 2 to the power 5 and 2 to the power 8. What is the greatest common factor? Okay, the greatest common factor is when we factor among these three a prime factor and write the common base with the smallest exponent. So what is a prime factor? That is a prime number that can only divide by itself and 1 and not equal to 1. You know the prime numbers previously, which are where a prime number is a positive integer not equal to 1 that has only one factor, which is itself and 1. You remember them, of course, the sets we discussed in the previous chapters. The 10th smallest prime numbers are 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29. Those are prime numbers. Well, going back to the questions, to find the greatest common factor, we find the prime factor and writing it with the smallest exponent. Okay, so what is the prime factor here among these three? We can say 2, because it is a prime base. Now we have a prime base. What this is common in here and in here and in here, so this is a prime factor. What is the smallest exponent that is common to those all threes? The smallest exponent that is common to those all threes is 3, because 2 to the power 3 can divide this, can divide this, and can divide this. Okay, and it is the smallest exponent, the prime factor with the smallest exponent, which is 3. So this is our greatest common factor, which is equal to 8. So our greatest common factor is 8. If another question comes to you, find the greatest common factor, okay, of a to the power 4 and a. So what is our answer? We find a prime factor base. We find a prime factor base with the smallest exponent. So what is a prime factor base here? As we discussed here, it could be a prime number base or a variable. Here we have a variable, so our prime factor base is a variable, which is a. Okay, prime factor, because it can only divide by itself and 1. This is the smallest that can divide by itself and 1. Okay, this is a prime factor. Now, to find the greatest common factor, we have to find the prime factor with smallest exponent. So what is the smallest exponent that can divide a to the power 4 and a? It is 1. So this is the greatest common factor for this example. That is the prime factor with its smallest exponent that can divide all terms. If another question comes to you, find the greatest common factor, okay, of, let's say, 27a cube b to the power 4 and 18b cube c. Now, the first question comes to you, what are the prime factors? We have two prime factors. Can be a prime number base or a variable. Okay, in this case specifically, we have two prime factors. One is a prime number base and two is a variable. So what are the prime factors with the smallest exponent? We will find together. We will see how can we get the greatest common factor. Okay, well, you see this first. We want to decompose it to prime factors. So decompose this to prime factors. This can be written as 3 to the power 3 multiplied in a cube multiplied in, as you see here, b4, b to the power 4, and here to b to the power 3. So I will write it to b to the power 3 multiplied in b. Okay, I will explain. Now let's take this. This is written as, we can decompose 18 to 2 multiplied in 3 square. So we are decomposing to prime factors, and b cube will remain and c will remain. As you can see, what are the common bases? We can see that this is a common base in both, and b is a common base in both. So we want the common bases with the smallest exponents. So here the common base with the smallest exponents are 3 to the power 2 and b to the power 3. This is simply the greatest common factor, which is 9b cube. 9b cube, the greatest common factor that can divide this and this. Okay, if you take 9b cube aside and factor this one, so it should be 3a cube b, and this one, if you factor it with 9b cube aside, it should be 2c. So we left with a prime number and variables that cannot be divided. Okay, this is how we factor. Okay, this is the greatest common factor as we discussed. in the coming examples we will go directly by knowing that you should keep this in mind when you factor and get to this answer immediately. We are not going to do this procedure, okay, to get to the greatest common factor. However, you should know that it is a prime factor with the smallest exponent, okay, that is common to all terms that you are factoring. Suppose we have two expressions, 3x multiplied in 2x plus 5, and the other expression is 4 multiplied in 2x plus 5. In this case, there is a common binomial factor. Here it is the binomial factor that is common. So the greatest common factor for these two expressions is 2x plus 5. The greatest common factor when asked for these two expressions is what? 2x plus 5. To make things simple, to find the greatest common factor, for me I use a formula or a rule that I am used to since my high school up to this moment. When there are numbers, find the greatest that divides them all. When there are variables, find the greatest that divides them all. This means that it should be common. If we say all, it should be common. If it is not common, then it is not the greatest common factor. So a simple rule: find the greatest that divides them all. For numbers and variables, find the greatest that divides them all. We will see examples together and apply this rule as you proceed. For example, factor out the greatest common factor of this question, which is 12x cubed y to the power 4 minus 24x squared y to the power 5 plus 18xy to the power 6. So how to factor this out, or how to factor the greatest common factor? The greatest common factor, as mentioned before, is to find the greatest that divides them all. You see numbers and then you see variables. For numbers, find the greatest that divides them all, and for variables, find the greatest that divides them all. Therefore, when we see numbers together, 12 minus 24 and 18, the greatest that divides them all is 6. If you divide 12 by 6, you will get 2. If you divide minus 24 by 6, you will get minus 4. If you divide 18 by 6, you will get 3. So 6 is the greatest that divides them all. Now let's look at the variables. What is the greatest that can divide them all? We have here x, and we have here x, and we have here x. So x cubed first, x squared, and x to the power 1 at the last term. So the greatest that divide them all is x. What about y to the power 4, y to the power 5, y to the power 6? So the greatest that divide them all is y to the power 4. Here now we factored the greatest common factor. This is the greatest common factor, okay? This is multiplied into, now when you factor, you should divide them. This should be left with 2x squared, and y to the power 4 divided by y to the power 4 should be eliminated, minus 4 x, because x squared divided by x is x. Y to the power 5 divided by y to the power 4 is y, plus 3, x divided by x will be eliminated, and y to the power 6 divided by y to the power 4 should be y squared. Now we factored the greatest common factor. This is our answer. We can see together that what did we do? We divided each by the greatest common factor, which is 6x y to the power 4, and this we divided by 6x y to the power 4, and with this we divided by 6x y to the power 4. So our answer came to this. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Y to the power 4 divided by y to the power 4 is 1. And this came to here. Minus 24 divided by 6 is minus 4. X squared divided by x is x. Y to the power 5 divided by y to the power 4 left with y. And this came to 18 divided by 6 is 3. X divided by x will be eliminated. Y to the power 6 divided by y to the power 4 is y squared. So if you multiply, this is how you do you factor the greatest common factor. This is for you to draw in your mind. Our answer is this one when we factoring the greatest common factor. I hope this is clear, because when we go to the next example, you should know that when we factor out the greatest common factor, this is what we do. We divide, and we left to what is this here inside. Okay. Another example, we have 6x minus 5 multiplied to 4x plus 3 minus 4x plus 3 multiplied to 3x minus 7. How to factor the greatest common factor? I think this is a very clear thing to do. Here we have 4x plus 3, and here we have 4x plus 3. So we find the greatest that divides them all. So this is the greatest that divides them all. Here we have our greatest common factor, which is 4x plus 3, the greatest that divide them all. Then you divide, open parenthesis. When you divide now 6x minus 5 multiplied in 4x plus 3 by 4x plus 3. When you divide them, this will eliminate this one. So we will be left with 6x minus 5. Here we will have 6x minus 5. Also, when you divide 4x plus 3 multiplied in 3x minus 7, when you divide it by 4x plus 3, this will eliminate this. So we will be left with 3x minus 7. Here we will have minus, open, 3x minus 7 and close parenthesis. So this is equal to, this is the greatest common factor. Okay, 4x plus 3 multiplied in 6x minus 5 minus 3x plus 7. So complete your factoring. 4x plus 3 multiplied 6x minus 3x is 3x minus 5 plus 7 is plus 2. Now you are done. In case of this, you can say the greatest common factor or the common binomial factor. The common binomial factor, because you cannot estimate that what is the greatest common factor here. However, what is the common binomial factor is this one. Okay, so the greatest common factor always is the greatest that divides them all. Okay, so here we can say the greatest binomial factor. In case of trinomial, you can say the greatest trinomial factor. In case of any polynomial, the greatest polynomial factor. So the greatest that divide them all. Okay, This is the main idea. Let's take another question. Let's say if we have if we have 6a cube b square minus 12 a square b plus 72 ab cube. So factor out the greatest common factor. We can see first the greatest that divides them all. We will see first numbers. Here are the numbers. Then we will see the variable, this variable, okay, and we will see this variable. Let me organize them again. So to factor out the greatest common factor, we will see the greatest that divides them all for numbers and for variables. So what are the numbers? Here we have 6, 12, 72. What are the variables? We have a and b. Okay, let's see. Here we have a, here we have a, and here we have a. B, now b. B we have here b 3, underlined with 3, and b underlined with 3, and here b underlined with 3. So what is the greatest that divides them all for 6 and minus 12 and 72? The greatest that divides them all is 6, because 6 multiplied 6 divided by 6 is 1, minus 12 divided by 6 is 2, 72 divided by 6 is 12. Okay, and for a now, what is the greatest that divided them all? We have a cube, a square, a. So a is the greatest that divide them all. For b now, b square and b cube. What is the greatest that divide them all? It is b. Okay. So open parenthesis. This is equal to a square b minus 2a alone plus 12. A will eliminate each other, and b will be left with b square. Okay, so let's have another question. If we say d, I will use the same 6a cube b to the power 2 minus 12 a square b to the power, let's say 6, plus 72 a b to the power 3. So what is the greatest that divides them all? We know it is 6. A, we have a. However, b, the greatest that divides them all here is b square. So we will be left with a square minus 2 a b to the power 4 plus 12. A will eliminate a, however b square divided by b cube divided by b square is b. So this how examples came. This is clear. You should practice and practice to understand. Now let's see question E. Factor out the greatest common factor for 5x plus 20. Okay, so our answer should be, what is the greatest that can divide them all? Here we have 5, 20. We have numbers. Okay, x, we don't have another variable, so we can factor out the numbers. So what is the greatest that can divide them all? I say 5 multiplied in, then should be here x plus 4. Okay, another question. if I say 8x squared plus 12x minus 40, okay, we have only numbers to factor. However, variables we don't have here another variable, so we have only number to factor. So what is the greatest that divide 8, 12 minus 40? The greatest that can divide them all, I say 4. Here we will have 2, here we will have 3, and here we will have minus 10. So 4 is the greatest that can divide them all. 4, okay, then the answer here should be, if you factor it out, 2x squared plus 3x minus 10. Another question, if I say minus 15x squared minus 12x, now we have numbers and we have variables, okay, we have numbers and we have variables. For numbers, 15 and 12, okay, minus 15 and minus 12. For variables, we have x squared and x. What are the greatest that can divide them all? For this, I can say to you, if you divide by 3 both, we will lift here by minus 5, and here we will lift by minus 4. So 3 is the greatest that can divide them all, okay. What about x squared and x? If we divide here by x and here by x, okay, here we will be left by x, and here we will be left by 1, okay. So x is the greatest that divide them all. So our greatest common factor is 3x. Then we will be left with minus 5x minus 4 alone. I will in next examples I will never write such a thing, because this you should write it in your mind. And if you take the negative outside, it should be minus 3x multiplied in 5x plus 4, okay. Another question, let's say h, if I say minus 6y squared minus 54y. So if you factor out, you can factor immediately minus 6y, okay, you can factor immediately. 6 minus 6 is common to those both, because 6 can divide by 6 is 1, and 54 divided by 6 is 9. So if you take minus 6 away, and y is the greatest for these both, so if you take minus 6 away with y, open parenthesis, so this is equal to y plus 9. You are done for this question. Another question, 10x squared y plus 6xy minus 14x y squared. So you can see here in numbers what is the greatest that can divide them all. I can say 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 14 divided by 2 is minus 7. Minus 14 divided by 2 is minus 7. What about here? X squared, and here we have x, and here we have x. The greatest that can divide them all is x. What about y? We have here y, here we have y, here we have y squared. So the greatest that can divide them all is y. Open parenthesis, then divide 10x squared multiplied by the greatest common factor should be 5x. Divide now 6xy by the greatest common factor should be 3. Divide now the minus 14x multiplied by y squared by the greatest common factor, it should be negative 7y. And you are done for this question. Let's say if you have question J, if I have x minus 3 multiplied in a plus b plus x minus 3 multiplied in a plus 2b. So when you answer the question, you can see this is a common factor for both sides. Okay, take it out, then divide. So this is should be equal to a plus b, and this one here should be left with this term here, should polynomial or the multiplied two binomials should be left with a plus 2b. So our answer should be x minus 3, a plus a is 2a, b plus 2b is 3b. Then you are done. Another question, if it comes to you, x minus 4 multiplied in 2a minus b plus x plus 4 multiplied in 2a minus b. So what is the greatest that can divide them all? We can say this is the greatest that can divide them all. So take it aside. So it should be 2a minus b multiplied in open parentheses. This will be left x minus 4, and this will be x plus 4. So your final answer should be equal to 2a minus b multiplied in here x plus x is 2x, and minus 4 plus 4 will eliminate each other, so multiplied in 2x, and you are done.